Good evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. This forum will be for candidates for the Ojai City Council. I'm David Marin, a member of the League of Women Voters. The way this works tonight for the audience, if you have a question, just please raise your hand. Our volunteers will bring you an index card. You can write as many questions as you want tonight, and we'll try to get as many asked as we can. We ask you, if you just came in, to please silence your cell phones. Candidates, you're going to have 1.5 minutes for opening statements. We'll begin with Ryan, and you have, Ryan, our timers are right here. They're going to give you warnings when you have 30, 15, and then we'll tell you to stop. With that, let's begin. Our first candidate, Ryan Blatz.
Thank you, David. Thank you, first of all, to the League of Women Voters for putting on this very well-run event and a history of bringing these events to the Ojai Valley, and they're very important. And even though there's a race of 3 of us up here, there's technically a 4th person who's dropped out, but I want to thank everybody who's hanging around for the after party, if you will, of the debate. For those of you who haven't heard us talk yet, hopefully you'll hear something new. First of all, my name is Ryan Blatz. I am a lifelong Ojai resident. Many of you may know my father was on the city council for a couple of terms, and I am trying to replace his spot. I am an attorney in town. I've had my own practice here for about 5 years, but I've also lived in Ojai for 34 of those 37 years of mine, other than living in LA and Irvine for college for a little bit when I was going to school. I'm running for city council because I care deeply about this community. I grew up here thinking I one day would probably want to leave and go somewhere else, and as soon as I realized what LA was like and Orange County was like, I decided to change my commute from 2.5 hours to 2.5 minutes, and I enjoy Ojai greatly because of that. It's really a special, unique place, and I am very, very committed to keeping it that way. For the last 8+ years, I have volunteered with Ojai Flow. We helped get rid of Golden State Water that was costing our community over $4 million extra for water costs, something I am very proud of. And I've also worked with these 2 gentlemen here extensively on that project as well. So I not only ask for your vote, but I am also saying I look very forward to working with all of the citizens in here, but also my colleagues up here.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Bill Wyrick.
I also want to thank the League of Women Voters. My respect for this organization goes way back. Many of you might know my mother. She has been, made me realize as a very young man the importance of the League. She's a woman who is always very comfortable speaking up about whatever she has in her mind. And I was led to this position in terms of serving this first term on council by 2 paths, really, and things that I still believe are very important. I believe that council should do active oversight on local government to make sure the services are provided effectively and productively to the citizens, and effective advocacy in terms of everything from water to housing to a number of issues that we'll probably talk tonight about. The specific paths I got involved in terms of active oversight, seeing that the city had a program for non-conforming housing units, but the program was designed so it was completely ineffective and it needed to be changed, and I got involved with that. And then I looked at my experience as a professional economist with public utility economics, made me realize what a bad situation the Golden State Water was, and I got involved in that and lent my efforts and many other efforts to establishing what is really an incredible accomplishment of taking back control of that private water utility. You don't know how rare that is, how many have tried and how many have failed. Few have succeeded because of the strength of this community, and that's what I want to continue being part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Randy Haney.
Thank you, David, and I'll be the third one to say thank you to the League of Women Voters. You know, it's interesting, this is our 3rd meeting, and every time I get ready to speak, you know, you just internally freeze. You're just scared to death, as many of you that I know and to see around the valley, it's irrelevant. You're still scared to death up here. So, you know, I moved here, first of all, I started coming here over probably 55 years ago. We used to go to Lake Casitas. As a young man growing up, I always wondered why my parents would bring us here. You had this large body of water, you had 15 to 25 kids in our camping pack, and you couldn't touch the water. And it was like, why are you taking us to a place that's 100 degrees on this large body of water and we can't touch it? But aside from that, you know, I was interviewing for a job in Santa Barbara, and my wife, Dara Marks, who's here, she goes, let's stop in Ojai. And I'm going, okay, where's Ojai? Maybe I shouldn't say that, but for me it was, okay, where's Ojai? Now, I've been coming to the lake for a long time, but, we'd come on late Friday night and leave, 15 seconds, oh my God. So, a little bit about myself. First of all, I'm obviously I'm a sitting council person, and I just want to say quickly, I really
Thank you, Randy. You'll have a chance in the next questions. So you'll have plenty of
Right.
time to ad lib in future questions. Bill, we're going to start with you on the first question, and I do want to remind the audience. So you are voting for 3 candidates in the election. There are 4 on your ballot. Denise Sturr, I think is how you pronounce her last name, decided and I think has publicized the fact that she is not an active candidate. But her name is on the ballot. You do have to vote. And these 3 would obviously hope to be the top 3 vote getters. Otherwise, Denise will be elected. So with that as an explanation, let's start with you, Bill, on the first question. And this generally is a yes or no question, but you can expand on that. Do you think Ojai needs to grow its population? And if you do, what percentage should the city grow annually?
I have no idea what an annual rate would be. Here's the issue with the city of Ojai. We have a big retire-in-place dynamic going on in our population. The average household size has continually been dropping. So in other words, we have a lot fewer people living in our housing stock. That's just the way it is. I know my sister is an excellent example of that. She raised 3 kids in the house, and now she lives in it by herself, and she's perfectly happy. So we actually have room to have more families. I don't think that we are looking at a growth in the sense of having, a traditional growth path. That's not what we want. But I do think we have a way of looking at having more people live in a more traditional, more historic number of people per parcel. As has been talked about, the biggest issue with housing is real estate prices, and the other one is regulation. And so what's happened, and that's made it a more difficult situation, as we've had fewer people living per parcel, we end up putting upward pressure on housing prices. So I do think that we ought to be, we can talk about this more, but we do need to be looking at ways of maybe reversing the reduction in household size.
Thank you. Randy, same question to you. Yes or no? Do you think Ojai needs to grow its population? And if so, what percentage?
So first of all, I just wanted to say quickly before I ended, I just wanted to say I'm very grateful to have been elected to the city council the last go around, and now I'll talk about growth. When we moved here 25 years ago, I remember coming into town and there was a sign that said 7,535 and something of that nature, and then I looked at Dara and I said, well, there's 3 of us moving in and 1 moving out, so we just increased the population by 2. 7,356, and 25 years later, we're probably 7,356. There isn't growth here. There's a change in who is here. We don't necessarily have the ability to grow. In fact, I don't think in 4.3 miles we have any ability to grow. And when we've had this discussion in the past, I've kept saying that there's never going to be a 40, 50, or 400 or 500 unit complex built in this community. We're a maintenance community, so as far as housing, that's where we are there. I don't think you could put a percentage on what we need to grow or how we need to grow, but I will tell you this much: when I walk around my neighborhood and I see all of the young children that are present that I hadn't seen in a long time, it does make me feel good about the possibilities of the fact that there is some growth.
Thank you. Ryan, same question to you. Yes or no? Should the city grow? And if so, how much?
Well, I think that the appropriate amount of growth for Ojai is what happens naturally, and what's been happening naturally is not a lot of growth. The fundamentals that make a community vibrant and healthy and those things aren't necessarily the growth that's absolutely necessary, and we don't have a lot of places to put more people. what we do see is that some of those things that may be tied to our lack of growth are fundamental things that aren't doing really well for our community. We know that attendance in the school district is significantly down. We know that the cost of living in Ojai is really high. We know that there's a disproportionate amount of older and retired people versus younger, and people filling up those homes with new families and filling up the schools. So when we look at it, do we need growth? Well, we need growth in certain areas, and those areas we have to find creative solutions for, to help in housing, to help in our local cost of living. All of those different aspects combine to say, hey, we need more growth in different areas, but it's awfully hard to add more people in Ojai because we don't really have a place for them to go. We don't really have a city that has a lot of desire to develop anywhere. And as we move forward, we're going to have to find ways to have affordable housing and some of these other things fit inside of Ojai. But really, if we're not expanding significantly, what we really need to do is focus on those areas where we see problems and try and fix them with creative solutions.
Thank you. Randy, we're going to start this question with you. This may not take a minute and a half. You don't have to go the full minute and a half. Is there a better way to shorten council meetings? Is there a better way to shorten council meetings and also to bring the community together in more harmony?
You know, actually, I think we have, to a degree, shortened council meetings. You know, how we, you know, like recently we changed the public comment from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. We're going to try that. There's a number of things that we could, well, first of all, I don't even know if we need to shorten them. Let's start from that premise. The fact that a council meets on a biweekly basis is so that the community can be involved, so that the community can come and engage us. So it's not necessarily having a shorter council session, it's having a more productive council session, I think would be the way to look at council. And we could do that by, it's real simple, by looking at the people who come, by listening to the people that come, okay? And learning from the comments that they make and the suggestions that they ask. And from that, we could become a better council, but not necessarily a shorter council.
Thank you. Ryan, same question to you about shortening the council and improving harmony.
Well, I can say this, we definitely don't need to make them longer. I think everybody agrees with that. I have been to not nearly as many council meetings as these guys, but off to an awful lot. And I think that, you know, the hard part is that you don't want to stifle the ability for the public to communicate and the time to go through issues and work through them. But at the same time, I've yet to be to a council meeting where there wasn't some efficiency issues in some way that they could have shortened the time. And there's also, I think, some blame to go on the staff. A lot of the time I've been there and the staff is regurgitating complete reports that they've put together that I've read as a citizen, that the council members, I believe, have read. And there's really no necessity, they're public information, going through and rereading it. You know, as an attorney, I don't go to court and reread the brief I wrote that the judge just read. That wouldn't make any sense. You're supposed to come up with something, expand on it a little bit. So I think that there's some internal things that you could do without shortchanging the public from being able to speaking by just cleaning some of those up. And I think it'd be important to try and find a way to direct staff to try and be a little more efficient with their communication to the council.
Thank you. Bill, we'll wrap up this question with you.
There's a kind of an ongoing piece of amusement. Every time we hire a staff person and they're introduced to council, I've noticed this over the past 4 years, they come before council and they thank you for welcoming them into the city, and they look behind and go, is it always like this? And we go, yeah. We always have a lot of people at our council meetings. It's unusual. We probably have more participation in this community in our council meetings than you'll see in almost in any other city in Ventura County, and that's a good thing. Yes, the things that were just said in terms of getting focused on the part of staff comments and focused on council deliberations, those are good things, and those are things that we've worked on. We're a little better, we can still do better. But in terms of welcoming the public, there is a certain degree of how the meeting is structured so that participation is also efficient. But frankly, I'm proud of some aspects of our meeting lengths because it means that we have a committed and engaged community, and it is really exceptional. If you look at, if you go to any other city council meetings anywhere in this county, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Okay, Bill, thank you. We're going to start with you on the next question, Bill. We talked about this in the earlier forum, but The fire was obviously a huge impact in Ojai, so share with us your thoughts about long-term recovery from the fire, and what are your thoughts about emergency response? So the long-term recovery, businesses and individuals, and also emergency response.
Well, I'm not going to be able to be encyclopedic about it, but I can touch on a couple bases.
Oh, you know what? I'm terribly sorry. I skipped the other two gentlemen on that last question.
Okay.
So you conduct my pay. And,
Somebody else.
Yeah. So Ryan, actually, the same question to you that we just had. You know, as far as your thoughts. Wait a minute, I did ask.
You did. I think you did ask that.
Okay.
Double
Go
his
with
pay.
whatever.
Quickly double David pay.
That's what you get for complimenting me at the break. Right? You jinxed me. Okay, let's try that again.
Where are we at now?
Good thing we're not on TV, though.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So we're going to restart this with you, Bill. And the question is,
Wait, what about me?
I think we asked you the question too,
I'm
right?
joking.
Okay.
Disaster preparedness.
So the fire. Let's
Okay,
talk
two
about
things.
your views about, we'll restart the timer for you as well. Long-term recovery and also emergency response.
First on emergency response, I think our Mayor Johnston touched on the fact that, and this is something that I also have been pushing for, is that we have this emergency council in the code that wasn't fully implemented. I think it is being fully implemented now. There were a couple of things that came out of review. For example, our AM radio station went down, and we're going to harden that and have more redundancy in terms of communication. So I think that's being done and looked at more carefully, and council has together been pushing that. On recovery, I'm a board member of the Economic Development Collaborative for Ventura County, and one of the things that Ojai has not been taking advantage of is some of these services from small, they are the representative, they deliver services for the Small Business Administration, things like that. Right after the fire, I immediately got very engaged with that group and said, you need to come up here. You might have seen some of the trailer services that were up here. Got engaged with a lot of the local business community, and we are now, we have tripled the amount of small businesses getting aid and getting services through this group. So this is the kind of collaboration we can do to help with fire recovery. And the last thing I want to say really quickly is we're looking at hardening our code in very specific ways right now for our in our building code provisions. Not onerous, but things that make sense. Like, do we really want to have acrylic side skylights that embers can can land on and burn through? Simple thing to change. We need to harden our community.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, same question to you. What are your thoughts about long-term recovery for businesses and individuals, and also emergency response?
Well, first of all, on the economic recovery side, I am currently on the board of directors at the Chamber of Commerce, and after the fire, we were monitoring very closely what was going on with the economic activity in the valley. And I can say that we are above and beyond much better than we thought we were going to be. I was very concerned there was going to be an echo effect of the economic downturn that happened in December and January that would carry on into this year. The city's TOT tax dollars haven't really taken a huge hit, and local businesses are coming back at a fairly good clip. So that's good news. Obviously, there's more we can do, but I think that is a sign that Ojai has galvanized together and done a pretty good job so far, and we need to continue that effort. But more importantly, on the emergency preparedness, I stayed in town. I was mandatory evacuated, but I stayed in town, and I realized that there was a real problem with information. The first day and second days of the fire, I jokingly, but partly true, was saying the most dangerous place you could be was on Facebook. Because if you're on Facebook, the Vons was burning down, the post office was burning down, and I was disappointed that there wasn't a central arm in the city of Ojai that was actually a communicative device of accurate information, as simple as a Facebook page is that the city could have put out. There's got to be someone that's dedicated to getting accurate information out. We cannot simply rely on the county as we did in this. I'll also say that in 2015, with Ojai Flow, we forced the city and Golden State Water to test all the fire hydrants. We're very proud. I'm very proud of the fact that they all worked inside the city, but we know that not every part of the system is in perfect shape. We need to review that and put the pressure
you,
on
Ryan.
places outside the city to get
Thank
it done.
you. Randy, same question to you.
So the, regarding the recovery, we had quite a few citizens actually step up to the plate. Elizabeth Afner from the zoo actually created a meeting place for small business owners to actually come to and discuss some of their concerns and some of their, obviously their major issues regarding the fire. The city's response, personally, I'll speak for me. You know, this is the first disaster that I'd ever been involved with at this level. And we had not had any training. We had not had any, obviously I had no past experience with something of that nature. So moving forward, I would think that being a bigger part of the police and the fire and the first responders and being more active in the education of how they react and what they do and why they do it would be better for the council. So from that perspective, I think we can learn and grow and do a better job. The other concern that I heard coming out of the fire was, again, lack of communication. Our communication tower did go down, but the reality was not many people were even listening to that station to begin with. So do we have a need of some type of marquee or something that's going to tell the community where we are, what we're doing, and what are the impacts? So creating that would be something that we should do.
Thank you, Randy.
Yeah.
Bless you. Okay, Ryan, you're up first with this next question. And the question is, would you support watering the golf course a little bit less rather than putting restrictions on residents and new businesses? Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Soul Golf Course is county, but nonetheless, they're taking up some of your water. So what are your views about reducing water usage at the golf course, or perhaps you have other places you think that might be able to be reduced?
Well, and it's not just one golf course. There's two in the city of Ojai, and they both use water, and they both use water from Lake Casitas, and they both use water from underground wells, and they're both taking the measures they can to try and reduce their water usage. I happen to be very familiar with Soul Park Golf Course and the management there, and they're really trying to do the best they can with the parameters of how their contract with the county works, the way the water works, the way their wells work. It's very complicated, and one of the core problems they have is that you can't necessarily use recycled water that goes back into the rivers in the valley. So some of the options that are on the table to really reduce water usage aren't on the table for them because of specific issues. But I would say that everybody has to chip in. There's nobody who should be exempt from needing to curtail their water usage for purposes of conservation for everyone. We're moving towards a stage 5 level drought with Casitas, which means that all hands are on deck to try and help the situation. We know how aggressive the debates are about alternative water sources with Casitas. I've worked with Casitas extensively. We convinced them with Ojai Flow to take on one of the biggest projects they ever had. It's time for them to come up with a project that's going to work for an alternative water source. But more importantly, we can't say that the golf courses are any more responsible than any other agency or any other entity. Everybody's got to chip in, and if you're using a lot of water, then you should do your fair share to conserve.
Thank you. Randy, same question to you about the golf courses and less water usage.
Well, first of all, I know for a fact that the Ojai Valley Inn is in a major reduction of their water use right now. They're going to be converting a lot of their roughs and inaccessible spaces into native species and water-wise or drought-tolerant plant material. So they're making an extended effort right now to turn their facility into this lush green golf course into a more of a desert scape that you see in Palm Springs, where you have green landing areas and a green tee box and a green putting surface, and then everything else in between is native. So I applaud them for making that effort. I believe Soul Park could do the same thing. I think as a landscape contractor and someone who really understands water hydrology and water applications, the first thing that you could do is shrink the water usage in all of your roughs. You can minimize the water applications in your fairways. Obviously, you need a tee box and you need a landing area, a putting green. But aside from that, it should all be open to some form of modification or restriction. The other thing that I know that they're doing, in fact, all of these golf courses have done it for years, they're ahead of the technology. They're all using low precipitation irrigation devices. They're all on clocks. They're all actually micromanaged as to how they.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, Bill, we'll wrap up with you on this question about the golf courses.
Yes, I think definitely whatever, there might be opportunities out there that we're not aware of now, but both courses should be converted to links courses, which is what Councilman Haney was talking about. They should fit the scape, they should fit the climate they're in, and that would mean a links course. Both of them should be redesigned for that. That's a way of maintaining their attractiveness for visitors, but, you know, because frankly, let's not forget, what paves our streets, it's our visitors. So let's not forget that, you know, when we decide we want to shut down a golf course or something. I think another couple things we could do is we could stand by the golf courses when they're looking at doing changes to their landscaping, you know, like taking out certain types of non-native species that are wasting water and causing water to be taken out of the turf areas, and they've gotten some pushback from people, and the council should stand up with public education and help them with that. I think also we ought to be looking at out-of-the-box things. And for example, we got a ticking time bomb in the Arbolada with septic tanks. We might have a scalping plan opportunity where the city could work with the Ojai Valley Inn and the schools involved that are downhill, as well as looking at the Arbolada, both the part that's in the city and out the city, and help them solve that problem in a cost-effective way that would provide recycled water for turf irrigation.
Thank you. Randy, we're going to start the next question with you. There's a couple of measures on the ballot regarding the mayor's position. I believe one is whether it should be appointed or elected. The other one, should it be 2 years or 4 years? Tell us what your positions are on those measures and why.
Well, you know, initially this came up and I was for it. I thought that having a mayor elected and then a mayor serving on council for 2 years would give us guidance and continuity and direction from that position. My observation over the last 2 years is I haven't necessarily seen that, and it's not because of the individual doing it, it's just the nature of the beast. When you're on council, you may think you have a list of priorities now you're going to proceed, and every 2 weeks a new one comes up. So the mayor's hands are pretty much tied at times as to setting an agenda and following through. So having looked at it and assessed it for the last 2 years, I'm inclined to go back to a rotational mayor. And here's something I don't think most, I believe I'm right, and if I'm not, we'll make sure that the mayor and I put it in the priority, not the priority, but we're protocols. But the council can elect the mayor themselves on the rotation. It doesn't necessarily mean that the 5 people on are going to rotate every year. The council has the right to say, we really like this person and the direction that person's taking us and how he or she conducts our meetings, and we can choose to put that person on for more than 1 year. So I don't know if most people understand that, but we do have the right. We already have a way to have a mayor sitting for more than 1 year.
Thank you. Bill, same question to you. Your positions on the 2 ballot measures?
People that put that on the ballot and pushed it were trying to look at that as a step towards having a charter city and a strong mayor form of government. That is wrong. I don't think we need to go there. And so we need to look at, and again, no comment on the people running for mayor or our existing mayor. I'm just looking at this structurally, all right? Just looking at it structurally. And we have a problem with a 4-run rotation, which we have to restore back to 3-2. We have a situation where I just disagree. I don't think running every 2 years is healthy. Mayor Johnston, I wouldn't wish myself in your position at all, having to campaign basically, you know, right away after 1 year. I think it's healthier to have 4-year terms. And if we're going to have an elected mayor, I think it should be 4-year term. But on the other hand, I think it's healthier if we go back to all elected at large or all the same. I think that promotes teamwork and collegiality, which was talked about earlier.
Thank you. Ryan, we'll wrap up with you on the same question.
Well, the city of Ojai has experimented with the directly elected mayor for 2 years, and there's some pros and cons. You know, there's the direct election of a mayor gives the citizens a direct voice to say who the representative that holds that mayor position is, even though it doesn't carry a giant amount of extraordinary authority outside of the other council members. It still carries some weight and is an important position. And I think it's important that if the citizens want to have that right to name who it is, they should have that right. But what we found out is that 2 years and rerunning is just not really a great idea. It takes up too much time and money. So when we look at what currently is in place, what's changed is the current city council has changed some of the protocols for how they would go about deciding if it was under a rotation. And I think some of the things that I've heard them discuss are appropriate measures to kind of figure out the right balance between not having it only be having to run every 2 years, but maybe a mayor can be on the council for 2 years, so there's some continuity in the leadership. I think that if we take that authority and put it back on the city council, I think that the city council will make a good decision on how to do it, so I think that's the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you. We're going to stay with you, Ryan, on the next question. We've touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's get into more detail. So share with us your thoughts, what you would do to support affordable housing. I know you've talked about the city's not necessarily growing, but that doesn't mean that people who want to live here don't need affordable housing. So share with us your thoughts, what we can do to support affordable housing.
Well, affordable housing, I like to redefine it a little bit as subsidized affordable housing, which applies to RHNA numbers that the state requires. We have certain areas that are designated for possible development there, and lower on the average cost of a place to live affordable housing, because those are two distinctly different things. For legal purposes, the RHNA representative came to the city not that long ago and kind of said, hey, we're going to help you guys, we're going to facilitate you being compliant with these rules, but eventually we're going to be a little more aggressive in forcing you to do it. We have had some proposals in front of the city before that looked at different areas that could be developed, and those weren't right for various different reasons. We have to make sure if we're putting in that type of subsidized affordable housing that we do a very creative and constructive job of reaching out to the various different people in our community and bringing them together so there's a consensus on an idea so that it doesn't get beat up and turn to nothing in the process of city council. Judy Murphy, Bill Miley, who I believe are still here, they put in a ton of work figuring out a really good plan, and unfortunately it didn't work because there was not enough organization cooperation between the various factions in Ojai to get that done. So I think ultimately we're going to have to find creative ways to do it. There's not a proposal for it yet, and on the other end of affordable housing, I think we have to look at proposals that give us an option to have that lower cost housing available in Ojai in the pockets that are there. But again, we don't have any proposals in front of us that we can say whether that's right or not for Ojai. When they come up, we need to look at them and figure out whether they fit correctly.
Thank you. Bill, same question to you. Your ideas about affordable housing.
Just to repeat what study after study has shown, the drivers of high housing costs are the cost of land and the cost of regulation. And that basically is what has driven the state legislature to say to all the cities in California, you're going to allow infill of some kind. You can, have a range of discretion for you to manage that infill within the character of your community. But if you don't show some accomplishment, some goals, what the people in Sacramento will say, we're going to start reducing that discretion. I want to keep that discretion wise. I want to show progress. That's what motivated me to get involved as a city councilman. Well, actually, I was first on the building appeals board, and we looked at, and then I got into the city council role. We looked at the fact that we had what better than to get a basic health and safety check on a non-permitted building that people have been living on for decades, and to be able to account for our affordable housing numbers and get it safe and better serving the public. Our program wasn't working. We had to reform the program because the cost of regulation was too high. We also then have reformed within state guidelines our ability to do accessory dwelling units. I'm a big proponent of that because if you do it right, it can fit within the character, and it allows kind of an organic ability. For example, it allows a retired person to say, okay, I'm going to live in the smaller place out back, and the kids in the family can live in the front. So we have to look at these organic options, and as well as the things that my colleagues are talking about. But again, we have to look at what the drivers are and how to address them. Cost of land, cost of regulation.
Thank you, Bill. Randy, same question to you.
So I'll start out with the term affordability, and I'm going to say it all starts at home. So what's our home? And our home is our community. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to have a dialogue, and we all have to be on the same page, is does this community, when it says they want affordable housing, mean it? Because it all sounds good, and that's what I hear all the time, yet the times that we brought it up and we brought projects forward, just even as a what if, they're completely shot down. So I think that term sounds good. I just haven't seen it feel good in this community. So that would be the first thing that I would say. We need to have a complete discussion and make sure that we're all in agreement that it starts at home, and it starts, and we all want to participate. The second thing is I would look at affordability also starts with In this community, it would be assessing all of the city land, because I believe you need to do joint partnerships with people that actually do affordable housing for a living. I don't think that we as a city can do it or do it well, although I am looking forward to the mayor and Mayor Johnson and Bill Miley's proposition that's going to be brought back to council regarding us creating affordability or an affordable housing complex, 6 homes or 3 homes, whatever it comes out. But again, I think the dialogue has to be we're all either in it or we're all against it, and we can't waver. And I'd like to see that discussion sooner than later. And thank you.
Thank you. Candidates, with your indulgence, I'd like to change the time to be just a minute so that I can get a few more in. Are you all comfortable with that? Thank you very
What
much.
are we going to say, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I ask it that way. Not the first time I've asked that question. Okay, so Bill, we're going to start with you, and I don't think this would take a minute and a half, but can you talk a little bit about public safety? Now, the question is actually about the police, the Ojai police vehicles, which are, you're using the sheriff, but they're large sport utility vehicles. Would it make more sense to have smaller vehicles when these are
Oh, my goodness.
retired? But while we're on the subject, just your views about public safety here in Ojai.
Well, I'm just going to launch into something. I'm going to segue a little bit, all right? Because we are, I think, this year going to be addressing a problem that's really countywide. The county sheriff was, written up in 2012 for not engaging in updating the contracts with the contract cities. I had some conversations with people like this at the League of California Cities convention that I just attended, and it's pretty much the year all the different cities in Ventura County are kind of going, yeah, this is the year we need to do that. And I think there's a number of things we need to look at in terms of updating the contracts with the Sheriff's Department, all the way in terms of from setting individual priorities, or having the ability to have individual municipality priorities, which is not really well laid out right now in the contracts, all the way to things like the appropriate equipment. But you have to understand, they buy things as a whole as the county. Now, we have excellent service from our Sheriff's Department. We have wonderful response times, but it's time to update those contracts.
Thank you, Bill. Randy, same question to you about the vehicles and your thoughts on public safety.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, that we have an incredible police and fire department that serves us, without a doubt. I know as a small community, we're not ranked in the county as far as safety. They usually look at larger communities, 100,000, 200,000, whatever. But I can tell you right now, we are the safest community. We're the greatest place to raise children. Public, our response time is incredible. I can't say anything negative about it. I would agree with Bill that we should look at the contract and we should be writing contracts specifically for our needs. I don't think we have any control over what vehicles or size of vehicles. In fact, I'm even watching a truck drive around now that I question, do we lay the bad guys in the back of the bed? But those are issues that those are issues that they need to answer, not necessarily us. But I will say this: we do have a great fire chief, and we do have a great police captain serving us.
Thank you. Ryan, same question to you on public safety and the police vehicles.
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't know if the city has the authority to dictate what vehicles the police department uses because we contract those services through the county of Ventura. But if we haven't asked, we don't know the answer. And I can tell you that being in Ojai as long as I have and being an attorney in town, we don't need something that can hold 5 criminals at once, and we probably don't need anything that is the size of some of those SUVs. There's not a lot of high-speed car chases in Ojai, if you didn't already know that. So there may be some options that would reduce some of the costs we have, but that would be a question that we need to raise and bring up in the time when we are looking at renegotiating it. With the help of the other cities in the county, it's probably a good time to take a look at that. Maybe that's one of the things that can help us save a little bit of money on what we pay the county to provide those services.
Thank you. And we're going to start the next question with you, Randy. Now, city controls the city and the school districts control the school districts, so I know you don't have full authority over them. But can you talk about how you think the city and the school district can interact? What are some of the areas where you think there are concerns that the city and the school district can work on together?
Well, I know, I think it was 2 years ago that we had our first joint session with the school board, and we haven't had another one. So obviously, I think we need to have more of those. We are doing programming right now from the Recreation and Parks program on their facilities, so there is some joint recreation and education taking place already. I think we could do more of it. They probably own the largest amount of land in the city. So again, looking at our affordable housing issues and looking at other needs of the community, I think that we should probably be in greater dialogue with them. I know everyone's concern is the 80 acres in downtown Ojai, and that's a separate issue all in itself. It's going to take longer than a minute to talk about that, but that will be coming up soon, the next greatest discussion in our community as to what to do with those 8 acres jointly.
Thank you. Ryan, same question to you on working with the school district.
Well, obviously, the city council needs to coexist with the Ojai Unified School District Board and work cohesively with them and work on projects together to make sure that answers work better for everybody. The one specific thing that very well may come up and has already kind of come up is the Chaparral property. Obviously, there has to be a partnership between the city of Ojai and the school district, because whatever ends up being used with that property, if it ends up being something besides what it's currently used for, the city has to bless it with saying that that's good for zoning and other issues. So that's imperative. But I used to work a lot with the former superintendent, Dr. Hank Bangser, and I talked to him a lot about things that the city could do and things they could do. And there's not a lot as far as enrollment in the school district. There's not a lot as far as funding. But I still think that there's an important role to play where we work with the school district to assist them on some of those issues, because they're not getting it done on their own, and we need help. And these are things that are good for the community, so there's no reason the city shouldn't be directly involved as much as they can.
Thank you. Bill, we'll wrap up the question with you.
I think my colleagues mentioned a couple of things. I mean, we've had a really growing cooperation in the Park and Recs Department that's been really useful. I think the vitality of this community depends upon working effectively between the city and the school system. I mean, this is a part of having support for families being able to live and work here. This is part of it. I think that one thing that I'm actively engaged in right now and still researching is there are proliferating programs in legislation at both the federal and state level promoting cooperation between cities and school systems precisely in the situation that we are in. Namely, the school system having the shrinking population of enrollment and having to look at repurposing some of its land, especially the land in the core of the city. Our mutual self-interest is better served by looking at those programs, deciding what kind of things we could work together with to both help the school system with their financial situation and in terms of reinventing that land for the public purpose.
Thank you. You're all doing a great job with 1 minute, so thank you for that. Okay, we are going to start
Shane's
with...
doing good time with the signs, too.
All right, Bill, we're going to start with you. Other cities in Ventura County have been changing to elections by district. If that should happen in the Ojai, and that usually comes from external pressure, if the city decides that it must go to at-large elections by district, elections by district, what is your position about that? Would you go along with that? Would you try to litigate against it? And what do you think is the right way to create those districts?
It's being instigated by state law. The state law, I think, has two flaws. One, there's no minimum city size. Two, there's no precise measure of when you're accomplishing the purpose of serving underrepresented populations. It just says, you know, do it by district, whether or not you can really show it's accomplishing anything or not. The city, I don't know how much I can say or not say, because the council is engaged in this, and we've had some discussions about this, but we're going to be looking at the population characteristics of the city. We're going to be looking at whether or not it makes any sense to actually district or not. Some cities have looked at this and they just don't know how you do it. When you get to a small city, it increasingly makes no sense. I frankly think Sacramento needs a little bit of a cure here and have a minimum city size for this to make any sense at all.
Thank you. Ryan, same question to you.
Well, obviously, in a town the size of Ojai, splitting up 5 different ways, there's not even a piece of the pie for everybody. That would create very, very small, less than a square mile districts that, for purposes in Ojai, there'd be a real problem with getting candidates. I mean, if you didn't have a candidate in that little tiny area, depending on how many people lived in there, there'd be a serious problem. I just don't think it's the right thing for Ojai. Obviously, the state needs to look at it and have a minimum size requirement, but I have not seen all the information. I don't think it's been fully fleshed out exactly how this would work in Ojai. If it's something that's forced upon us, we'll follow the laws as required. But I would be open to ideas of avoiding it unless it was really shown that it was really necessary and worthwhile for the city of Ojai.
Thank you. Randy, we'll wrap up with you.
Well, if it wasn't such a serious issue and the fact that we are going to be more likely litigating it, I'll just tell you my simple thoughts on it. I lay awake at night drawing my district. And then I say to myself, well, do I want that area or do I not want that area? I have no idea how we would take 4.3 square miles, divide it by 5, and form some equal representation. I think what we're doing is we're doing well. So obviously I'm not for whoever came up with this idea. I know in larger cities there might be a need for it, so I don't disagree with it. I don't have a sense that it's an issue here. I think we represent the community well, and I think that we have open representation where anyone in this community should feel good about running for council. So,
Okay. We're going to start with you, Ryan. This will be the last question, and I didn't get to this in the mayor's forum, but it has to do with taking monies that were, and I'm presuming this issue is, or this rule is there, that there is money set aside for water education of the public. How do you feel about taking that money and using it to explore either alternative water sources or some other projects?
Well, as a general principle, I'm against taking money that's earmarked and changing its use for anything different. Because I think if you earmark money, you should keep it earmarked. That's the decision you made. Unless there's circumstances that make that outside of a reasonable decision, I think you should stick to what you did. That being said, if we're talking about water and we're moving it from conservation to education or education to conservation or other types of things that reasonably make sense, and you're going to be more efficient with spending that dollar in that direction, then that's a pretty good thing to consider. I mean, there's no good reason why, if you're going to get more bang for your buck out of something else, that you would be pigeonholed, as long as it's ultimately achieving the same goal of reducing water usage, increasing education and conservation. Then wherever we can get the most for that dollar, I think would make sense.
Thank you. Randy, what are your thoughts about taking money from the water education budget to use elsewhere related to water, particularly alternative structures?
well, obviously, first of all, I didn't even know that we had a specific line item in our budget that said water, so I don't know where that came up or if that even exists. But aside from that, I think what we're doing presently right now, we've just signed an MOU with Sierra Progressive Water. They're seeking grant funding, and right now we're looking at probably $2.5 million worth of it. If we get some of that funding, part of that will be we'll utilize that for education. So that's just one component of it. Well, again, just talking about water in general that way, educating the community about conservation and about all the other different elements of water is something that we have been doing for the last couple of years and will continue to do. So maybe I'm not grasping the question well enough, but I think we're doing as a council pretty good on educating the community and seeking
Gonna have to stop
different
you there.
funding levels and sources to help in that manner.
Thank you very much. Okay, candidates, we are ready for...
I don't get to answer that?
Yes, you do get to answer it.
Um,
Thank you. Bill, same question to you.
The best education is by example, and I believe the city's doing that. Randy and I really pushed the effort to get the city formally engaged in stormwater capture, doing it as an inherent kind of by design with our streets program, as well as identifying where we can engage in better stormwater capture in our stream courses. We've got 16 plus miles of stream courses in our little city. We have all kinds of opportunities for this. In fact, the preliminary information is that we have great potential for this. We've been looking at different water-wise elements in terms of our ordinance changes. I think the best way to do this is that you take action, and your public education is explaining clearly why you're doing it and then explaining the results, and that's the best way to do it. You show by doing, education by doing.
Okay, thank you, candidates. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and begin our closing statements. We'll start with Randy Haney.
Well, again, David, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank the league for holding this conversation. I'm going to start again 25 years ago when I moved here. No, I'm not. I seriously just wanted to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to respond to your questions, to look you in the eye so you can actually judge us and see us, and ask yourself, are we the credible people that you would like representing you? And saying that, I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity you've given me for the last 3.5 years. And I would say thank you in advance if you choose to vote for me for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Bill Wyrick.
I think it goes without saying how passionately committed I am to this very special place. It's a magnet for certain kinds of people, the kind of people who want to be here. I got drawn to this community in the mid-'70s. It's still a burning memory in my head when I drove here, just by some happenstance, the things, and I was listening to Krishnamurti lecture, and it just sort of started the whole love affair with Ojai. But I believe that I bring to the table not just the passion and the commitment, but the skills to serve that commitment. With my training as an economist, with the public service I've had over many decades, and I'm very committed to being very clear about why I'm making decisions and what my decisions are. And it's been a real privilege to serve, and I would ask you for your vote to be able to serve another 4 years.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Ryan Blatz.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone for being here and bearing with us tonight, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. I wanna make one thing very clear. We didn't have any water questions, which is the first time I've answered a water question in a very long time. We are going to figure out this water situation, and it may not be the city council's job, but the city council may be the agency that is the catalyst to get it done. And I asked a lot of members of this community to trust us to get rid of Golden State Water, to be able to pass a tax on your properties to us to afford to get rid of them. And we are seeing the benefits of that extensively in our community. I did the math the other day. It's up to over $4 million, as I said before, that we would be saving, that we're saving on an annual basis by not buying Casitas water, not Golden State Water anymore. We will get it figured out. We will work hard. Mayor Johnson is committed to it, and if he wins, I know he's going to continue to be committed to it. When I was with Ojai Flow, these two gentlemen worked diligently. I worked with them extensively, and I know that they are not going to lay down until we get this particular issue figured out. There's a lot of other things we need to do, but we will not ignore that, and I promise you, just as I did with Ojai Flow, that we will get it done. We will find a way to make sure Ojai has a sustainable, secure water future. And in addition to that, I think it's imperative that we look for creative solutions to balance our community from not just a tourism-based community, not just a destination of Ojai, but Ojai the community. The place that I grew up in, I feel is eroding a little bit and needs to be balanced back that direction. And I think we're going to find creative solutions to do that.
Thank you. I have a couple of important announcements, but first, how about a round of applause for these candidates? I want to remind everyone that there are 4 people on the ballot. You're voting for 3. Denise Sturr has declined to actively run, so she, I think, is supporting these 3 candidates as well. So you will be voting for 3. I want to take a moment to thank the City of Ojai for helping us to secure this venue and being able to do this. Also, as a reminder, in the back of the room, we have the pros and cons. You could pick up a copy. They're free. It gives you quick, short information about the ballot propositions on the state ballot. And finally, the volunteers from the league, Doris, Jane, Betsy, Cheryl and Sharon up here, Judy, Carol, Pat Essex, Sage, and I'm David. Thank you all for coming tonight, and don't forget to vote. And also, last day to register is October 22nd. Good night.